All right, so today we are diving into the world of Catch-22 by Joseph Heller.
Oh, this is gonna be fun.
Yeah, we've got some excerpts here focusing on a few of the main characters.
Yeah, like Usarian?
Yeah, Yossarian and Milo Minderbinder, Dokanika, major, major, major.
Oh, what a name.
I know, right? It's a whole cast of characters. And we're going to dig into not just the story, but the satire, the way Heller uses it to critique war and bureaucracy, and of course, what a Catch-22 really is.
Yeah, it's become part of our language, like when you're stuck in a situation where the rules are just totally illogical, that's a catch-22.
Exactly. And the book is full of those situations. So let's start with Yossarian. He's a bombardier in World War II, flying missions over Italy, and all he wants is to survive. But the excerpts really paint a picture of how insane his world is.
And that's what's so brilliant about Heller. He takes this very real fear, this disillusionment of war, and makes it absurd. Like Yossarian pretending to have a liver problem just to stay in the hospital, avoid flying more missions.
It's funny, but it's also kind of scary. It shows how desperate he is to escape the system.
Right. And then there's that whole episode with him censoring letters. He starts by removing all the adjectives, then the articles. The language becomes completely nonsensical.
It's like he's trying to break down communication itself, right?
Yeah. And it highlights how bureaucracy can dehumanize people,
Yeah.
even in something as basic as language. Like, the rules are so arbitrary that they strip away meaning.
And let's not forget about the Lepage glue gun, a glue gun as a weapon.
It's ridiculous.
What?
But that's the point, right? Heller's making us question the logic of war, or the lack of logic.
Exactly. He's exposing the absurdity at the heart of it all. Okay, so we've got this backdrop of absurdity, and then we get to the core of the novel, the actual Catch-22. In one of the excerpts, Dr. Nika explains it to Yossarian, who desperately wants to be sent home after flying his required missions.
Right, and the rule is you can be grounded for insanity. But to be grounded, you have to ask.
And if you ask, it means you're sane enough to recognize the danger, so they won't ground you.
Exactly. It's this circular logic that keeps Yossarian and others trapped in a system that's failing them.
And it's not just limited to the military, is it? We've all encountered Catch-22 situations where the rules just seem designed to prevent you from getting what you need.
Totally. It's about power dynamics. Whether it's the military, a corporation, even a family, there are always systems in place, and they don't always work in your favor.
So we've got Yossarian navigating this crazy world, but then we're introduced to this whole cast of supporting characters who are just as out there, if not more so.
Yeah, and they all represent different facets of Heller's satire. Like, take Milo Minderbinder, the mess officer. He's this entrepreneurial genius, creates this huge syndicate, M&M Enterprises.
It's hilarious, like war profiteering taken to the extreme.
Exactly. But it also raises some uncomfortable questions about capitalism, about greed, especially in times of war.
Well, and he bombs his own squadron for profit, justifying it by saying it's good for the syndicate, it's chilling, because it shows how easily good intentions can be twisted.
Totally. And his whole egg scheme, buying eggs for 7 cents and selling them for 5.
Losing money on every transaction.
He's like, in the long run, I'll make a profit. It's this absurd logic, like the market will just magically work things out.
And then there's Major, 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 the most awkwardly named character ever.
His name is literally Major 4 times.
And it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. His father names him that as a joke, but it ends up shaping his whole life, pushing him into this leadership position he never wanted.
He's totally out of his depth. He ends up hiding in his office, only accessible through a tiny window.
Trying to escape the absurdity.
It's like he's a symbol of how systems promote people based on arbitrary factors, not actual competence.
Speaking of absurd situations, we have to mention Dr. Nika, declared dead after a plane crash, even though he's alive and well.
It's bureaucracy gone mad. The paperwork says he's dead, so no one will treat him, even with him standing right there arguing with them.
He's a living ghost, trapped by the system's inability to acknowledge its own mistakes.
It's both funny and terrifying. It makes you think about how easily we can all become victims of these kinds of systems.
It's clear that Heller isn't just telling a war story. He's using humor to explore something much deeper, much darker.
Absolutely. Catch-22 is hilarious, but it's also incredibly insightful. It's about war, bureaucracy, human nature.
And it makes you question everything.
Right. It makes you think, what am I doing? Am I part of the problem?
And that's just the beginning. So let's keep exploring these characters, these themes, and see what other insights we can glean from this amazing book.
I'm excited to dive in further.
Me too. Catch-22 is a wild ride, and we're just getting started.
It's interesting how these characters, they all kind of grapple with this big catch in
Mhm.
different ways. Some, like Yossarian, they rebel, try to break free from the
For
system.
others, they try to work within it, right? Like manipulate it to their advantage.
Yeah, like Milo with his whole profit-driven thing, or even major retreating into isolation. It's like they're all searching for some kind of freedom, you know?
Trying to make sense of the madness.
Exactly. And that's what makes Catch-22 so thought-provoking, I think.
Mm.
It doesn't give you easy answers. It just leaves you with these questions about freedom, about agency, about power.
And what's interesting is that Heller doesn't really create clear-cut heroes or villains.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Even Yossarian, who we kind of root for, he does things that make you question his morality.
Right, right.
Like, he manipulates the system for his own benefit. Sometimes he even exploits others along the way. It's like even those who resist can become part of the problem.
That's the thing about satire, isn't it? It shows us how complex people are, even the ones who are trying to do the right thing.
It makes you question your own assumptions. Like, are we all capable of becoming a Milo Minderbinder given the right circumstances?
Ooh, that's a tough one. But it's a question worth asking.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Because Catch-22, it's not just a critique of war or bureaucracy, it's a reflection on human nature itself.
Yeah, I agree.
And speaking of reflection, we've talked about the humor, the absurdity, but we can't ignore the darkness that's woven throughout the book.
Oh, absolutely.
Heller doesn't shy away from the realities of war, the trauma, the constant threat of death.
Yeah.
Like one of the excerpts deals with Snowden's death, and it's graphic, it's disturbing, it really stays with Yossarian.
It's almost like a recurring nightmare for him.
Right, and that scene, it's not just about dying, it's about the loss of innocence, the shattering of any kind of meaning.
The realization that the catch has real consequences, that people pay the price.
And then you have the soldier in white, this completely bandaged figure in the hospital,
Barely alive, just,
a symbol of the war's hidden casualties.
right, the physical and psychological wounds that never fully heal.
Snowden's death, the soldier in white, they both highlight how war dehumanizes people.
Yeah, one is a sudden, violent loss, the other a slow, agonizing decline.
But they both show how individuals are stripped of their humanity.
And yet, amidst all this darkness, Heller also shows us moments of, I don't know, maybe even tenderness.
Yeah, like with the chaplain. He goes through this incredible transformation.
Oh, he's a fascinating character.
He starts out so timid, unsure of his faith, his place in the world.
But the war changes him, right?
Totally. He becomes disillusioned, starts lying to doctors, making up illnesses.
He even admits to wanting to punch authority figures. It's like he's reclaiming his own moral compass.
It shows that even in the midst of absurdity, you can still find ways to assert your own agency.
To make choices that align with your values, even if it means going against the grain.
And then there's the whole exploration of time and memory in the book. Like, those conversations between Yossarian and Dunbar, they're hilarious.
Oh yeah, they're arguing about how to measure time.
Yossarian wants it to slow down. Dunbar wants to shorten his life to get it over with quicker.
It seems absurd, but it speaks to their different ways of coping with trauma.
It's like their perception of time itself has been warped by the war.
It makes you question how we experience time, how our realities are shaped by our circumstances.
And speaking of different realities, I was struck by the portrayal of women in the excerpts we have.
Interesting.
Like Catch-22 is mostly focused on the men's experiences, but the women, they offer a different perspective.
They represent the world outside the military, right?
Exactly, like Luciana, the Italian woman Yossarian falls for, or even Nately's prostitute who he idealizes, despite the exploitative nature of their relationship.
It's complicated, for sure.
They challenge Yossarian's views on women, on love, on life in general, and they expose the hypocrisy, the double standards that exist in this patriarchal system.
Right, both in war and in society as a whole.
It adds another layer to Heller's critique. Catch-22 isn't just about war. It's about power dynamics, gender roles, all these systems of oppression.
And how they all intersect and reinforce each other.
Exactly. But even with all the satire, all the darkness, there are moments of real human connection that shine through.
Yeah, for sure.
Like the relationship between Yossarian and Nately. It's complex and ultimately tragic.
It is.
Nately's so devoted to the prostitute, he truly believes in their love. And that contrasts so sharply with Yossarian's cynicism.
Right, and then Nately dies. And it has a huge impact on Yossarian.
It forces him to confront the fragility of life, the emotional toll of war.
It's a reminder that even in the midst of absurdity, human relationships still matter.
So we have this whole cast of characters, each grappling with the catch in their own way.
And through their struggles, their triumphs, their failures, we gain this deeper understanding of the book's themes.
And the complexities of human nature.
And as we dig deeper into these excerpts, we start to see these connections, these recurring motifs.
The way Heller weaves together humor and tragedy and social commentary.
It's what makes Catch-22 such a powerful and unforgettable book.
It's wild, right? Catch-22, it kind of flips the whole war story thing on its head.
Oh, totally. It's not about heroes or glory. It's about, like, the opposite.
This absurdity of it all.
Yeah, and how dehumanizing it is. Like, it challenges all those expectations you have about war stories.
Instead of glorifying combat, it focuses on, like, the psychological toll it takes on people.
How it, like, warps their minds.
Yeah.
You know, changes how they see everything.
Yossarian's always afraid of dying, trying to get out of flying missions. That's where a lot of the humor comes in.
It's like his coping mechanism, right?
Yeah. He uses it to deal with the tension, the fear that's always there.
And that's how Heller tackles these, like, huge questions about war. He uses humor, so it's not all doom and gloom.
It's such a weird mix, though. Like, one minute you're laughing, the next minute you're thinking about Snowden's death.
Oh, man, yeah. That scene's so intense.
It sticks with you.
Totally. For Yossarian, it's a turning point. Like, he realizes the only way to survive is to just reject the whole system.
Because the system's just going to chew him up and spit him out.
It doesn't care about him or any individual.
All it cares about is keeping itself going.
And that's the whole catch thing, right? This messed up logic that's everywhere.
And it's not just the military. It's like in any bureaucracy, any institution where the rules are rigged to benefit those in power.
Yeah, it's about control.
Like with Doc Danica. Officially dead, but he's standing right there.
The paperwork's more important than reality.
It shows how these systems can get so out of touch with, like, basic human decency.
It's both absurd and tragic, you know?
It's so frustrating to see these characters struggle against these invisible forces.
But I think that frustration, that's part of what makes Catch-22 so powerful.
It's like Heller's saying, hey, look at this. Look at how messed up this is.
Yeah, and it makes you think, am I part of this too?
It forces you to look in the mirror.
And what's amazing is how Heller uses humor to talk about these really deep philosophical ideas.
Like free will, determinism, even the nature of reality.
Remember those conversations between Yossarian and Dunbar about time?
Oh, yeah, they're arguing about how to measure it.
It's hilarious, but it also makes you think about how we experience time, how our realities are shaped by what we go through.
It's like, do we really have control over our own destinies? Or are we all just pawns in some cosmic game?
Those are the kind of questions Catch-22 makes you wrestle with.
It's a book that really makes you think, even after you've finished reading it.
It sticks with you.
It changes how you see the world.
And I think that's what makes Heller's work so brilliant. It entertains you, but it also challenges you.
To think critically, to question things, to resist the catch wherever you find it.
Absolutely. Don't let it win, you know?
Keep fighting for a better world, even when it all seems absurd.
Keep hoping.
And keep reading Catch-22, because it's a book that will always be relevant, always have something to teach us.
It's a classic for a reason.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Catch-22.
It's been a blast.
Until next time.